Hello everyone and welcome back to the Little Quilter, and as you can see behind me, the Merry Little Christmas Picnic Quilt is done. How exciting is that? I'm so excited. So today we're going to do a little review, a recap about this quilt, sort of my overall thoughts on it, the kind of things that I did with it, my hiccups along the way, and kind of then just a general overview. So let's go ahead and actually start with the quilt itself. So this quilt, I purchased a quilt kit from the Shabby Fabrics website, and the quilt kit came with all of this fabric and I can show you here the binding, okay? And this was a quilt kit for a lap size quilt, and you can see the lap size quilt here is 51 by 68 inches finished, and it is fat quarter friendly, so it also gives you yardage for if you just wanted to make this quilt on your own, or you had some scrap fabric that you wanted to do this quilt with yourself. Now, the quilt obviously looks a little different than this here in the sense that the fabric chosen for this quilt when it originally was done is not the same as the Christmas fabric that we have back here. So this is a completely different fabric pattern. My assumption is that it's the Merry Little Christmas fabric, but they didn't give me a listing of what this fabric was called when I purchased the quilt kit, but you could use any fabric that you want. I do think that this is a scrap friendly quilt if you have large enough pieces, because of course these blocks are, as you can see, pretty big. So this right here is one block. So you do have to have a decent amount of that scrap fabric to use. Now, the picnic quilt here, the good part about this is that it is definitely reusable. You can see this quilt looks very dramatically different from this Christmas quilt, so you could do lots of things with this quilt design. Okay, let's talk about sewing this pattern together. It came together super fast. It was really easy to cut, so because I was doing, I think it was, 16 fat quarters is what I was given to work with, and so I just had to iron out 16 fat quarters and then cut down the pieces according to size based on the directions, and they came together really fast. Like I said, this is a pretty decently sized block. There's not a whole lot of complicated, there's no diagonal seams, everything is really straightforward stitching, and that was really nice after having just finished the Northwest quilt, where it was just everything was getting cut and turned around and added to. So this was a very fast quilt to come together after having worked on that one. So the next thing I want to talk about is a curated design versus a scrappy design. I did try to curate this quilt, so I tried to sort of lay it out based on what the picture looked like that they provided me, and essentially along the way I just got lost. I don't know if I didn't lay out enough pieces in one or got confused when I was laying them out, but things got a little jumbled, and I could tell based on the layouts that I was getting. Now, one thing that I did try to do was to basically alternate between green and red. So you can see here that this is a green block, then up here we have a red block, and then down below this one right here, which I know some of them were a little mixed, but this is a little bit more red in this block, and then tried to sort of alternate those as well as I was going through. Sometimes that worked out perfectly and sometimes it didn't, and that's just kind of par the course in my opinion on quilting. Every once in a while you're going to have a block that just doesn't sort of fit with the rest of it, and I don't think that that is necessarily a bad thing, especially in a quilt that is so scrap friendly. So my opinion is I don't think that this quilt needs to really be a curated quilt. I think that you can certainly just cut your fabric out, lay it out and kind of pick as you go to create the designs that you think will look good together. And I would say because of how this quilt design is, I think that would work with any fabric line that you're working with. My personal preference, if you're trying to make a scrappy quilt curated, would be to basically just use the same fabric line. So laundry basket fabrics, or choose a different line. I can't think of another one right now, to be honest, like a Moda fabric or Riley Blake, and just choose a designer and then choose anything within their fabric line. And I think that it looks really nice. Yes, you could definitely just choose all of the scraps that you have, and I still think it would look really nice, but I just think it's a lot easier to coordinate a curated scrappy quilt when you have a lot of the same fabric line, because people tend to have a very sort of a style. So it's not like you're mixing mid-century modern with bohemian versus traditional, right? You're kind of, it all flows together because it's in the same style, if that makes sense. So you can certainly do it any way you want, but that's just my general kind of rule of thumb for those beginners. If you're going, well, I want to do a scrappy quilt, but I don't know how to do it, or I look at my fabrics and they just don't match. They don't mesh well. And usually that's because you're using something so completely different that sometimes that works great and it looks really, really cool. And other times it just looks like a hodgepodge that doesn't work well. So my trick is to use the same fabric line. And I think that anything you make with those fabric lines, as long as they're from the same designer, it's gonna look fine, because everything generally tends to flow really well with the same design. Okay. As we're talking about fabric design, let's talk about the backing fabric. Now, this quilt kit did not come with backing fabric, and I ended up choosing this fabric right here from Hobby Lobby, and I actually took the quilt with me, went to it, and just started sitting in, putting my quilt up against different backing ideas that I liked, and this one worked really well. In fact, I just think it is the perfect backing. The colors, the sort of layout, the mishmash of it, it just really, really fits, and I could not be happier with this backing fabric. And also, the other reason I recommend that you take your quilt with you is just to make sure that the tones are right, because I think it can be a little bit difficult to match these red tones and these darker green tones, because it's really easy to get a really bright red, and these are a little bit more subdued, a little more, I feel like, antiqueified. I don't think that's a word, but they have a little bit more of that just antique feeling to me, or retro feeling, versus a really bright red and a really bright new green, right? So I recommend you take that, and that will help you pick out your backing so that it meshes well with the front. Now, that doesn't always have to be the case. Maybe you just have some backing laying around, but personally I like them to kind of go a little bit together so that it's not such a juxtaposition when you're looking at that quilt. There may be some quilts out there that's what you want, is that juxtaposition, and I think that's great. But for me and this quilt, I wanted it to be very harmonious, right? Okay, so we've talked about the quilt design, we've talked about the backing fabric and the fabric itself. Now we're going to talk about the pantograph. So, and the quilting design. I decided to use a pantograph for this quilt for a couple of reasons. One, because this is kind of an all-over design and a repeating design and a very busy quilt. There's lots of things happening in here. I don't think that going really highly detailed is warranted, and part of that is just because it's going to be lost in this quilt. If I had gone through and made, and it could have been a beautiful design within each different block and doing something very similar, I just don't think it would have shown itself well because the fabric is so busy, and I would have done all of that work. Not that it wouldn't have been pretty, but it's just not really going to be appreciated in the way that I would like it to if I'm going to put that much work into it. So I decided to do an all over pattern. Certainly you could free motion quilt an all over pattern, and I have done that before, but I tend to use patterns when I free motion quilt that are very dense, and I didn't want to do that for this quilt. I wanted to keep it very light, and a pantograph is a really easy way to do that, okay? How do I do my pantographs? I think it is obviously a very controversial thing that I do, because I certainly think some people just stand on the back of their quilt and outline it with their laser light, and they just quilt as they go. And I definitely think that that is cool. I have done that with one quilt, and I don't think that it looked bad. I just felt like I personally did not have the control and the smoothness associated with quilting from the front. And I think that just comes from not being able to see what I'm actually quilting and drawing. You know, it's kind of like, for me, I liken it to closing your eyes, putting your hand out, and then drawing. Obviously, it's not that dramatic because you have a laser light, but that laser light correlates, it's a bit of a mind meld for me, and I feel like my quilting is a lot smoother when I can see what I'm doing. So, what did I do to remedy that? What I have done for, I think, the last 2 or 3 pantographs is I have used the laser light but attached a pin. Now, this is the pin that I use, or one of the pins. This is the Leonis water-soluble marking pin. It's a very short pin. You can see, I think I have an average hand-ish size. I don't know, maybe I don't. Oh, whoop, there we go. So it's a smaller pin, more handheld size pin, but the reason I like that is because of how it attaches to the machine. I also, you know, I could attach it just like this, right? So you could just attach it like this with some zip ties. The thing and the reason why I use this, and this is a sort of, it's sort of something that I made, and I bought them on Amazon. So essentially you have this little piece right here, which is a little plastic. It's a little plastic pin holder, and basically I use this to attach to the machine. So if my finger is the machine, and then I've attached 2 little pin holders here, and they grip this pin a lot better, and that sort of holds it to my machine. I then use zip ties, 2 zip ties, and I think reusable zip ties has really changed this for me, okay? Before, when I was doing this, I have used tape, washi tape, I have used painter's tape, I have used, what are those, rubber bands to try and rubber band it around, and the reusable zip ties has been a game changer. So I cannot recommend them more. I can list the ones that I use down below. I think I just bought like a multi-pack, and I actually bought it for the greenhouse and then have found them to be quite useful. So I definitely recommend it, and I feel like it's a little bit more environmentally friendly because I'm not constantly cutting. I'm able to actually reuse the zip ties and take them on and off the machine pretty easily. At some point they might break down from that just repetitive on and off, but they come in like a box of 100 or something, so you've got them for a lifetime, okay? Erasing the pin markers. So yes, I do always have anxiety with using these pins that it's not going to come off of the marker, and the main thing that you want to take note of is you do not want to press or apply any heat to this quilt until you are certain that all of the fabric marker has been erased, okay? And the way that I do that is with a squirt bottle, and I add baking soda to it. Make sure that it's baking soda, because if you add baking powder, which I kind of forgot and did one time, it will clog your spray bottle up, and I basically had to throw it away. It broke it, completely broke it. So the baking soda should be fairly clear in the bottle and you can see through it, whereas if you add baking powder to it, it's going to make it opaque and it's going to get chunky and it's going to break your mister. So don't do that. All right, baking soda. I don't want everybody throwing away their mister bottles and having to buy new ones. That is not environmentally friendly. So I use that. Basically, I will do a pass right, with my pin. So I'll use the pin, do a pass, go back. I will then sew over that from the front, and then once I am done sewing, I will go over that and spray immediately to remove it. If I don't think I'm going to have time to do that next row, then I will just stop for the night and I won't sew anymore. So I only mark on the quilt when I feel confident that I can then follow right behind it and erase it. And I have found that that is very helpful as well, of the time frame on which you leave the marker on before you wash it off can certainly make a difference. Now, obviously this is a blue pin and it is only as dark as it can be, so darker fabric, obviously it's going to have a harder time showing up. Lighter fabric, definitely much, much easier to show up, okay? Something to think about. I have ordered the air dry ones and I am interested to see when those get here how they're going to show up, because I have another quilt that I want to do a pantograph on and I want it to look really nice, so I do want to do it in the same way. Not that doing it from the back doesn't make it look nice, it's just I am not practiced enough with it, and when I know that there's a way that I can do it so that it looks really good, it's really hard for me to not do it. And like I said, I may go ahead and attach some test fabric and just quilt the difference so that I can actually see what the difference is between doing it from the back and doing it from the front, and I'll show you guys what that looks like as well, because I am personally interested, because I agree there's a lot of you out there going, why don't you just do it from the back and just do it and get over it and move on? And there's a part of me that totally understands that, and I agree 100%. And then there's the other part of me that's like, but whenever I did it from the front, it looks so much better. Also, it was way easier to see if I was having tension issues or bobbin issues or any of those, which was a lot harder to know when you can't see what you're doing from the front, right? Speaking of bobbins, let's talk about that. So the thread that I use, and you guys all know if you've watched my channel, that I used the Glide thread. This is the Glide Cream, so this was the top line that I used, and then I used the Magna Glide bobbins on the bottom. This was the first quilt since I started using Magna Glide way back when. I don't remember when I started using Magna Glide, but since I've been using those that I have had tension issues, and I think that that is amazing. And that's with literally very minimal adjusting, and not even really adjusting when I change bobbins, basically just getting that spool going and attaching, making sure that magnet attaches to and pulling enough thread so that the bobbin is ready to just unwind like it's supposed to. I don't really do a lot of tension changes when I am actually quilting. And I can see on this quilt, probably not everybody else, but I can see from the beginning to the end where I finally had in that last little bit, my tension was perfect. And I really enjoyed doing the last bit of this quilt. I feel like you guys saw that first frustrating part and how many problems I was having with tension. I was having dying markers and I couldn't see my pantograph, and I was having so many problems. I got new markers, I fixed my tension issue, and it was a breeze. It went by so much faster. Just the size of this pantograph and just the ease of doing it, it was really nice, and I truly enjoyed it after that point. So it kind of reinstilled my vigor of doing pantographs the way that I do, even though I know a lot of you guys want me to just do it the right way. I'll say the right way. I don't think there's a right way to quilt. I think there's the way that you enjoy quilting. How about that? Okay. Oh, I don't know if I told you what the pantograph on this was called, but it's called a gentle snowfall. And I think that this design, while made to look like a snowflake, and I definitely get that vibe on a Christmas quilt, I think that this pattern would be really good and a good reusable pattern for like a more floral or even like a springtime quilt. Like I have that one quilt, which I still haven't done, that's more springtime. I think you quilt flowers on it, and I think that this would look pretty nice on that as well, because then you get that sort of springtime flower vibe rather than a snowflake vibe like I feel like we get on this one. Okay, so my overall thoughts on this quilt. Good question. Let's see. My overall thoughts is that this is a super beginner friendly quilt. This thing came together really fast. It was a lap size quilt, so obviously I think that makes a significant difference. I'm typically one to do quilt sizes of queen or king size. I typically like really big quilts, and wow, that is really rewarding when you finish it. It takes a million times longer than it does to do a lap quilt or a crib quilt. And so when I do a lap quilt or when I do a crib quilt, oh my goodness, it seems like it's like I'm speeding through and I feel so accomplished. But I do truly think that this is beginner friendly. I also think that it would be a lot of fun for an accomplished quilter because it's going to just give you a relaxing quilt. There's not a lot of issues with the quilt and setting things up and laying stuff out. It's not a complicated build, right? It's something that's just nice and relaxing and fun to do, on a cozy night, make yourself a hot cup of tea, put some Netflix on, and just do some nice, easy quilting and piece together a beautiful quilt in no time. So I definitely would recommend having this quilt design in your pocket and putting it on your shelf, because you could do so many things with this picnic quilt, right? And it's such an easy and quick build for a quilt that it would be something, if you're going, oh my goodness, I have a party, I have a baby was born, all of the reasons that you could want to make a quilt and you don't have one readily available. This would be super fast to put together, and it still looks very attractive, still looks very handmade. So I definitely recommend the picnic quilt design, and I definitely recommend doing it in a beautiful Christmas design. It'll make you certainly feel quite festive. I have been very happy with how it turned out. I did not have a lot of issues with sewing it other than just making sure that you have your blocks turned the proper way, because they did kind of want to flip around on me sometimes. Okay, everybody, so that is the overview of this quilt. I hope that you guys have enjoyed this journey with me. It's been a quick one for us. I feel like generally my quilt journeys are a little bit longer, and I'm super excited to say that I finished the quilt for the family Christmas party, and I did it before December, and I'm really excited about that. So I hope that you guys have enjoyed it. I recommend you guys check out this picnic quilt design and put it in your stash of to-do. And as always, y'all have a great day, and we'll see you next time on The Little Quilter. Thanks.